the part of a lot of times in therapy, people will talk about, I need to heal my inner child. And it's easier to address the inner child because they're innocent and things were not their fault. But if you get to that inner adolescent, that's where the cringe and the shame and the, oh my God, I don't want to know you comes up, right? And addiction and a lot of maladaptive behavior develop during those formative years of early adolescence. So when you're talking about having compassion for that part, I'm thinking about how challenging that is because that inner teenager really brings up, for me, this sense of, for years, I wanted to disown her. She was so embarrassing to me. She was so pathetic to me. I was so disgusted almost by her that I really wanted to cut off that piece and all the things she did to, to fit in. Hi, and welcome to How Did You Get Here, a mental health podcast that focuses on generational trauma and resilience. I'm your host, Maya Kruger, and today I have a very special guest who I'm thrilled to speak with. Today I have Ben Mushlin. Ben is a New York City-based psychotherapist and the owner of Searchlight Therapy, also based in New York City. In this profession, it is very easy to feel lonely. You have your sessions with clients, and unless you seek out group supervision, which everyone should, you're mostly, for like 90% of the time, flying solo, and that can feel really, really lonely. And Ben and I worked together a couple of years ago in the city, and I immediately felt at home with him. There's something so calming about his presence and just about the way that you can kind of put any human catastrophe in his lap, and he will just talk about it in a soothing tone while slipping a joke in at the same time, kind of unfazed and really able to contain a lot. Ben speaks addiction fluently. He specializes in addiction. He's lived it and he treats it, and it's his life mission to give other people hope in the same way that he received it when he was so desperate for it when he was struggling. And in this conversation, we dig into his own personal trauma narrative and how it manifested it into a very long battle with addiction. Ben is adopted, and the only blood relative he knows is his daughter. So naturally, this conversation is about attachment, grief, and the ways in which we try to numb ourselves to pain. The question is if that is even possible, and if not, how do we make peace with the parts of us that still hurt? I am so excited for you to hear this conversation. This is Ben Mushlin. Enjoy. Hi, Ben.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for coming. Where do I find you today? Where are you located?
I am in my office in Midtown Manhattan, so I'm at work, and that's where I'm at today.
Okay, and you're a psychotherapist who specializes in addiction?
That's right. I've been doing this for a few years and specialize in addiction, especially with young adults and adolescents, individually, and also I do a lot of work with parents. So parents of those adolescents and young adults who are working through some stuff. So addressing the family system as a whole.
Okay. So really looking at the holistic picture of how things
Yeah.
influence addiction.
Yeah.
Which is something that you know a little bit about.
I have some personal experience in that. Yeah.
You sure do.
My own story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to get there.
Okay.
But I'm thinking about some of the roles that you play, which is psychotherapist and person in recovery and father and husband. Okay. So how do those roles intersect with your personal journey of navigating a really complex family experience, which I'd love for you to tell our listeners about?
Yeah. So I think it all, and I think this is part of what's so cool about your podcast and you having these having so many amazing people on and sharing the stories. I think all the hats I wear stem from my story and the things that I've been through, and so being a psychotherapist, I really got started in the kind of the helping industry because of the way people showed up and helped me when I needed it and continue to. Friends, professionals, really important people along the way. And I started working in this industry as a helper very soon after I went through treatment for my own alcoholism and addiction issues. Um, before marriage, before kid, before all of that. And so that's kind of how I got started. And then, and I know we'll talk more about it, but my own story of adoption and that, coming from a family system that was so fractured biologically, right? Really
Can
has
you say more
influenced.
about what that means?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I was adopted soon after my birth. So my birth mother was somebody who struggled with their own addiction issues. And I, so she had made the decision not to be a mom to me while she was pregnant with me. And so there's that. Um, I'll reference one of these great books. If you haven't read it, you should, called The Primal Wound, which is about
I'm writing
adoption.
that down.
Well,
Okay.
right. Yeah, highly recommend it. So I had this like biological separation from my mother pre-birth where, kind of already the messaging internally was we're going to separate. And
So
then,
in utero, you're experiencing a sense of rejection and impending separation.
yeah, I think that's, there's so much research out there now about the kind of in utero experience, and how those feelings get transferred and the stressors and those chemicals and all that. And so I'm already experiencing that in utero. And then right at birth, there's that actual physical separation. I'm not getting the skin to skin. I'm not doing, kind of that whole um, important process. And, that has stayed with me in one way or another through my whole life, especially in, it's affected relationships and attachment and things like that. And so my
When you
experience,
say, though, that it stayed with you, do you mean this skin hunger, this desire for connection, this emptiness?
yeah, I think it's the skin hunger, it's the hunger for connection, it's the hunger for this is the hunger for authentic connection, you know, and connection that lasts. And um I think a big part of my story and the way I've processed it and how it's affected me, and for so many people who have been adopted or adoptees and have similar stories, it's also that fear of abandonment and the fear of rejection and having a sensitivity to that, like a biological kind of very inner child sensitivity to that. And so, how I approach relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, work relationships, all of that has the background noise of that, that feeling of I want to be accepted, I want to be appreciated, I want to be taken care of, um, and I don't want to be rejected no matter what, and that gets into sometimes, especially in my past, I've done a lot of work on it, but a lot of people pleasing and things like that. So just to circle back to, I think some of your questions before, when I got into in terms of being a husband and a father, these are things that I've had to kind of approach in a unique way internally, working with my own therapist of, you know, what are appropriate boundaries, what's an appropriate kind of way to attach, and how are you um, reacting to like kind of the normal journey of a romantic partnership and a father-daughter relationship, and are these reactions based on kind of reality and a healthy dynamic, or is some of it based on some of these biological wounds that you have that's causing some of these maybe automatic reactions. So it's been, my story and the way my life started continues to, 30 plus years later, continues to really kind of affect the way I live my life.
You're talking, and I'm thinking about this idea of enoughness and satiation. And from my own personal experience of traumatic loss of a parent, for me, the sense of this insatiable hunger for that comfort is still ever so present, even though I do a shit ton of work on myself, and I'm heavily therapized. I've tried to do my own kind of spiritual journeys around this, but that backdrop of the wound, right? The craving, the it's not fairness of it is still there. So I'm curious about that part for you, if any of that resonates and how that kind of plays into the way that we soothe ourselves a lot of times through addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm thinking about is something that I've worked with the same therapist for over 10 years. Like basically,
Wow.
yeah, first when I first got into recovery, and it's been amazing. I mean, she's incredible, in my opinion. Um, and she said to me once early on, you know, these are not things that are going to go away. Like I'm not able, there shouldn't be a expectation that you're going to be cured from this kind of stuff. We can work on it, we can manage it, and we can get better in, approaching it and lower the volume of some of it, but it's not going to go away. And I think that was a really important realization for me of like, this is who I am. This is part of who I am, not the whole, but this is part of who I am. And um, this is, part affects how I approach life. And I think, before getting into recovery, I had no idea how to manage kind of the feelings that were coming up in relationships and friendships. How
Was
I,
this from as early as you can remember that you had these feelings in relation to other people in your life?
yeah, yeah, as early as I can remember, I remember feeling very like needing of acceptance and needing of, more so than any human, right? Like every human needs acceptance and belonging and
But it felt like what you needed was more.
was more. And it felt like I couldn't quite ever get what I needed. Like it was a reaching out and a desperation for something that I could never quite attain. And
Were there feelings about that though? Having feelings about your own feelings of needing more?
of course, yeah. Why do I need more? Why can't I just be okay? Right? Why not everybody, but people are pointing out, but you have this and you have that and things are good and this is good. And I think the intention behind people when they say that is so good, but it's so unhelpful,
Yeah.
to be like invalidating in that way. Uh, so yeah, from early on, and I had some like compounding experiences when I was a kid that was like not helpful in working on that part of myself. A lot of bullying in school, and especially elementary school and middle school. That was like felt very rejecting, right? Very
That's a trauma in itself,
right,
bullying.
right, very reinforcement of like I'm not good enough or this part of me is not good enough. Um, you know, in trauma in the family, with this also adopted sibling, non-biological sibling that I have. Um, and so kind of that compounding. And so yeah, it was as early as I can remember having that kind of emptiness, right? The feeling unfulfilled in terms of attachments and relationships.
We're both parents with a
Yeah.
history of trauma.
Yeah.
And I often think about the way that I show up as a mom with my own, large bag of shit that I come with. And if my kids feel it, right? If they felt it in utero and if they feel it now, and am I trying to compensate for the ways that I did not get needs met by giving them all of that, even though that may not even exactly be their specific needs? But the feeling of the fullness, right, that you're talking about, I'm never completely fulfilled. When you became a parent, and I know you love the crap out of your daughter,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, has that changed the way that you feel or defined being fulfilled?
It definitely changes the way I define it and kind of what I feel like I need to feel fulfilled. It's very much like the focus. I'm so focused on her, and feeling like that is my most important relationship. Um, and uh, it was such an interesting thing. I think it's important to mention. It was just such an interesting experience to when my daughter was born, and um, you know, especially like the months and maybe the first year, because I had no interaction with biological relatives before that, you
That's
know.
right.
Yeah,
She's your first.
she's my first like blood relative. And so it's like a very interesting kind of journey of realizing that, feeling how that affected the way I approached the relationship. Um, and so, I think what's been really helpful in being a parent is actually having the training I've had, clinically and working with parents. I do a lot of work with parents, um, and being able to kind of intellectualize some of the relationship and just like understanding what's what's kind of normative in terms of development. When she says, I don't love you anymore, Dada, when
Hmm.
she's upset, like, I feel like if I didn't understand um, kind of the developmental part of that, if I didn't understand and do all the work on my own stuff at that point, like that would have been something that would have been very
That would have hit you right in the wound of
right in
rejection.
the wound, right? But understanding, myself and her age when she says stuff like that is makes a huge difference. Um, and then as somebody who just has that trauma history and the intergenerational aspect of it, feeling very motivated to change patterns, um, and do things differently, and have her have do as much as I can to influence her to have an experience that's different from mine. Um,
What's
is
been the pattern, though, that's been hardest or most challenging to change?
it's an interesting question because being adopted and it being a closed adoption and not knowing much is I don't know if there are patterns, right? All I know, the only patterns I'm aware of is that my birth mother struggled with substance use and addiction. I struggled and continue to work on substance use and addiction. Um, I know from what I found out that she's someone who struggled with attachments and relationships, and I have a history of struggling with attachments and relationships. So those, in terms of like patterns and time frame, that's all I'm aware of. And so it's really like um, changing patterns is really just for me as a parent, really a lot of looking inward and saying what are ways that I have and continue to approach life that are maladjusted or maladaptive or unhealthy or have caused me harm in some way. and how can I not work to not, have her inherit that stuff. That's how I'll answer your question.
It's interesting that when you talk about what you do know about your birth mother, it's about her trauma. Do you know anything about, is she still alive, by the way?
No, no, she part of what I found out is she was actually murdered a couple years after I was born.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
She had a rough life. Very rough life.
Tragic.
Yeah. Yeah. Tragic.
Do you know anything about the kind of person she was, like what she liked to do, other than kind of the really awful, painful things she endured? But what was her passion, or what did she love?
I think that's one of the hard things just from a macro lens about closed adoptions is the adoptees don't learn much about, who their parent and or parents were as people. You know, they have to infer so much, um, and kind of guess and fantasize and all those sorts of things. So no, I don't. I don't have any of that.
It's almost like you have to fill in the blanks on your own, kind of like a family Mad Lib situation.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or or
Hmm. Yeah.
just accept the blanks and be okay with the blanks, right? And
See,
just
the reason I didn't even think about that is because I have such a hard time accepting,
yeah.
right? But your adoptive parents, do you think it's possible to take on their generational stuff and experiences just by proximity, by growing up with them, by experiencing them on that intimate level, that they can override the biological piece? What's your
Yes.
take on that?
Yeah, totally. So that I mean, you're referencing obviously the environmental, versus biological kind of stuff. And yes, I think totally. I I am very lucky to have the parents that I have, and I call them mom and dad. I always have, and they are my mom and dad. And I think just by having the family experience with them, and meeting relatives and hearing stories and seeing how they navigate the world, definitely pick up on some of the generational patterns that they have, and make it some of my own, so for them having the history of mental illness on my mother's side of the family, and abuse, and um, the things that she had to endure and kind of go through, um, and me really picking up on how she navigates the world through that history. And then on my father's side, having the survival history and the trauma history from part of his family going through the Holocaust and
Wow.
um, escaping Europe, and migrating, and the trauma of having to migrate, in that sort of lens. Um,
Which is interesting that you were adopted by Jewish people and your family of origin or your biological family was not Jewish.
who knows? No idea.
Well, I made an assumption. No, that's not known.
Not known. Not
Okay.
known. I mean,
Cut that piece out. Hmm.
percentages wise, right? Numbers wise, probably not.
Probably
But
not.
yeah, probably not. But yeah, adopted by Jewish parents, raised in a Jewish household, did the whole bar mitzvah, Hebrew school after school thing. So yeah, definitely. And growing up with that, you know, talk about generational trauma, like just and we can go on for hours about this, I'm sure, but just the trauma of being Jewish, right?
Absolutely.
And knowing the history and what's happening currently, and just living life as a Jewish person.
I want to ask you about the addiction piece
Yeah, please.
and the way that addiction is actually adaptive at some point. It's the way that we can survive. We found a way to soothe. We found a way to exist in the world without feeling like a gaping wound. When did you discover that that was an option? How old were you?
Pretty early on in my life. I would say when I really discovered it, I was about 12. Um, Being a New York City kid, public school, um, kind of all of that. I think I was exposed to a lot, and so I kind of started using substances around that time. I remember feeling the feeling of relief. And so when you talk about, kind of maladaptive behaviors and coping, and it was definitely that because
What was your first substance?
alcohol,
Okay.
and marijuana, and having that relief kind of come over me was like I was like, I found it, like I did it. This is like, why isn't everybody doing this all the time?
This is what you've been looking for.
This is what I've been looking for. In fact, talking about like relationships and attachment, I found my relationship with substances to be very fulfilling at the beginning, right?
Tell me about that.
Well, it was like exactly what I was looking for. Something that was always there, loyal, right? Was not rejecting, and gave me what I needed, right? Kind of like acceptance and support. Um,
Could rely on it to soothe you.
as long as I had a few dollars in my pocket, I could
It's
rely on.
there.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
did things start to go in a not great direction with substances?
Pretty quickly.
So you
uh,
were quickly abusing.
yeah, I think, you know, no, personally from my personal story and, you know, being in the recovery community and also my professional work, I know um, it's it's most people who really fall into that like kind of maladaptive coping with substances really are chasing that first feeling, right? And that usually involves having to use more and more and more um, to try to find that. So when I had that first relief, I wanted that so badly, right? I was looking forward to that again, and of course, my body built up tolerances to certain things, and um, um, so so yeah, I quickly kind of got into the regular kind of use, especially on the weekends, trying to use as much as I could. And then, um,
But wait, you're 12. Does anyone know about this? How are you hiding this if you're hiding it?
think a couple things. I think I'm hiding the like kind of my obsession with it, right? Nobody knows that but me. And I think there is, especially during that time, which is kind of late 90s, early 2000s, um, there is this thought in parenting that's like, oh, this is part of the process. This is
That
like a
kids just
normal
experiment
thing.
with things.
Yeah, kids experiment with things, and he's doing I think just fast forwarding a little bit, like it was 13, 14, like this is what kids do, and this is what teenagers do, and he's being safe about it, and it'll be fine. And so it's like this kind of like don't ask, don't tell, but we know what's going on.
But you're also
Um,
hiding in plain sight.
yeah, I've always been good at that. I've always been good at
Interesting.
hiding in plain sight.
For someone that so achingly wants to be seen, you're really good at hiding.
Well, yeah, because I don't want anybody to see anything that could be rejecting or lead to rejection.
That makes sense.
Let me show none of the things that could be bad marks.
Oh, yeah, I'm proficient at that too, my friend.
um, um, so yeah, and
Wait,
I,
so you're 14. Okay, it's still within the household. This is what kids do. He's experimenting. Let him have it. When was the moment where your surroundings or you realized this is a problem?
well, it was interesting because I stayed being good at hiding. right? I think, and and you'd have to, talk to my parents more about it, but there, I also just like kind of played on what I was given. So, you know, I'm hiding, I'm maintaining. I'm not like a star student, but I'm not like failing all my classes,
So there's no clear evident markers that this kid is in deep trouble.
Yeah, I'm like playing football and that's going well, like I'm functioning, right? Probably at that point I'm like a functioning alcoholic addict, right? And I'm still hiding, right? So s- start to struggle with like depression, anxiety, like those byproducts of um substance use in and of itself, but also just like my own stuff, right? Were causing depression, anxiety. I think I was in therapy for like a couple stints here and there in high school. Um,
That you requested or your parents
I think
did?
my parents did. I don't quite remember like why that was happening. It was probably, I don't know. But my mom being a psychotherapist herself, you know, was like, oh, therapy will fix it. Good talk therapy is gonna fix it. And I think it I think it really started to go off the rails my senior year in high school. Um, at that point I'm 17, 18, and my parents I think are thrilled to have the youngest child be 17, 18, and they can like kind of go on their trips and do their thing, and so my substance use increased in a big way then. I had already gotten into college. I did an early acceptance deal. Um,
Where did you go?
Went to Curry College, but only for a semester. Only for a semester. So I don't talk about that too much. So when I went to college after graduating high school, that also is when I got really bad, my substance use, because I was away from home. I was dorming. I had all this freedom, no eyes on me. I had found socially, my peers who were like kind of into the same thing and was supportive of it and all that. And I ended up not going to classes, and I think I walked away after a semester and a half where they basically said, please leave. Uh,
Kindly.
yeah, please leave.
Kindly. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a kindly of like, there's no way you're going to recover from this. Uh, so please leave. And
Oh,
no
wait,
need.
there are two pieces I want to ask you about
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Okay. First of all, so curious to hear about what it's like to have a mom who's a psychotherapist because we are the parents that are psychotherapists, right?
yeah,
So I need to know.
yeah,
Um, and the second thing is your parents were excited, you say, to, kind of basically have their own time and empty nest experience. And that's when things get bad. Do you
yeah,
think that there's a connection there that that's where things got worse for you?
yeah. I think I fully took advantage of it.
But was it a fear of the separation that they're moving on to a new phase? So this, no.
I think it was more of a like, I have the free house, let's party,
Okay.
you know, because
Okay.
I was feeling, I had become the football guy who was the party guy. And so I was feeling very accepted, not authentically, right? Nobody knew authentically who I was and what was going on. And that wasn't feeling accepted because I wasn't letting anybody into that.
But who was Ben, the substance under the influence? Who is this person that's accepted? Tell me about him.
I think, like, like underneath who I was that I wasn't letting anybody into. Is it so?
Or what are people seeing that makes you feel accepted at that point?
Oh, like the funny guy, the socially adaptable guy, the friends with everybody kind of guy.
So he's an outgoing guy. Things look
Yeah,
easy for him.
outgoing, funny, class clowny, charming, nice, people pleaser, uh,
And inside,
lonely, sad, um, anxious about attachments, um, hyper vigilant. analyzing what everybody's saying, and their reactions to me, and very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable in my own skin.
I'm nodding, furiously because the part of overanalyzing what people say and the sense of anxiety and that you just can't really exist in your own skin. Because for me, it was, I don't know that I'm reading the world correctly. And I feel like everyone is on this secret about how to exist in the world, and I didn't get the note. So I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm clearly failing. And even when I am succeeding, it's because, I got lucky. But this sense of being an outsider and not really reading, not knowing if you're fully accepted, not knowing if you're getting it is kind of what I'm getting from you, which is, I mean, I could be projecting my own stuff here, but that was my experience of it. Does that feel true to you?
Yeah, totally. I totally relate to that. Especially the like not knowing if I'm reading this right.
Oof, that's an awful one, especially in dating. Oh my God.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh, I want to throw up thinking about
I know.
the situations I put myself in. Oh my God.
Yeah, especially in dating, um, especially for someone who, like, for me, who just wants to be accepted, right? And loved, like, authentically, right? That quiet, just always questioning. The always questioning is, it's just exhausting. It's exhausting. Um, and substances were great for that. It was great.
Okay, but wait, take me back to the timeline. Okay, you're in college, you've been asked to kindly GTFO out of the first semester.
Yeah.
How do your parents respond to that?
Not thrilled.
Okay,
Not thrilled.
not thrilled,
Uh,
but were they very, did they take it very poorly? Was there a consequence?
they've never really taken anything poorly. I really lucked out in that, like,
Yeah.
yeah, they, they've always done a great job in what I try to kind of work on with the parents I work with professionally now, of like balancing the, like, here are the expectations and here are our boundaries, and also sympathetic and empathetic understanding, right? So, and being available. So balancing, they've always done a good job of that. So no, they were not thrilled. They were not
Okay.
happy that I got basically kicked out of college. Um, very worried about what that meant and what I was going to do. And they had finally gotten their two boys out of the house, and here I was coming back, like I need a place to
Did they
bring.
know that you needed treatment?
No, no, still hiding, still
You're
functioning.
still hiding. Okay, so
Yeah.
what did you say? Why did you say things didn't work out at college?
Oh, probably because I got kicked out. I
So
mean,
did they say why did you get kicked out? Why weren't you going to class?
oh, um, I think, it's funny. I don't remember. I I don't remember exactly. I'm sure in my charming, everything's fine kind of way, said like something along the lines of it, like it wasn't working out, or the structure, or my learning style, or
You found a way to justify it.
yeah, not. I
Okay.
don't know about justify it, but just like it's gonna be okay. Like it's all right. You know, we'll
The way
work
you
it
just
out.
said that was so like under the influence talk.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
gonna, yeah.
yeah. Everything's fine.
Okay.
Uh, and whether you'd have to ask them whether I really convinced them of that or not. But so I came back, um, got a job as a doorman on the Upper East Side, doing overnight shifts, which was awesome for
Really?
an alcoholic and an addict because I just get fucked up, at night. It's a small building, very wealthy families, so like nobody was doing anything from 11 a.m. to 7 a.m.
So you just sit there getting all kinds of high.
Doing all kinds of high, thinking I like made it, I had like figured it out.
This is the
Everything
pinnacle.
was
Yeah.
working out, the money was pretty good. for an 18-year-old, you know, and and of course, like as anything that where the priority is first getting high and getting fucked up, that didn't last either. You know, I ended up getting fired from there and like really not sure what I was going to do, what was going on. And, you know, I would say after I had left that college, my use had substantially picked up. You know, I was using all day, every day at that point. I was very rarely sober, and I was mostly a solo activity at that point.
Is this still alcohol and marijuana?
Yeah, a little cocaine now.
Okay. Okay.
Um, for those who know, you know, cocaine and alcohol is a great combination because you can use cocaine and drink more and kind of avoid a blackout.
Like
And
it sobers you up a little bit?
yeah, it kind of like it brings you back into reality a little bit. So that's kind of how I would use cocaine. So yeah, it was like alcohol, cocaine, marijuana were my big three, and yeah, it was all day, every day, and
You're still hiding?
still hiding, still hiding, and purely medicating, right? So now I'm using because I feel like I have um, to maintain, right, to function. Um, when I'm not using, which is usually at that point probably just first thing in the morning, um, just waking up, like the depression and anxiety is unbearable. So I have to use to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I'm also still doing the people pleasing thing, especially with my parents. So after I got fired from that job, um, now my parents were really getting concerned. I was like, I'm gonna go back to school. You know, I can do this. I'm gonna get
In
my life.
your substance abusing state, that's what you say, that you can do this and you're going to go back to school because you want to
Yeah,
please your parents.
yeah, because I want to please
Okay.
them. I want them to like stay off of my back and feel like I'm doing something that's good. And so I ended up starting kind of as a continuing education student at Pace University, downtown Manhattan, and working, doing one of those work like student jobs. It was like work, you know, like a reception or something.
Okay.
Like my time was filled, right? And it seemed like I was being productive, and that went on for I think like a year or two, and but all the while everything else was increasing in terms of you know substance use and anxiety and depression, and it got to the point where the depression was so bad, and I was getting suicidal, and I was feeling really crappy, and that one day I just like told my parents what was going on. I was all fucked up and I just told them what was going on. And I said, I really need help. I'm going to kill myself. It's going to happen.
Wow.
And that started my journey of recovery. And I ended up detoxing at a hospital in a psych unit for about 10 days, which was not the most fun. And
Was it physically painful as well?
yeah, I was having hallucinations and like kind of the classic delirium tremors, the DTs that come with alcohol. So I was having the shakes and hallucinating and having delusions and uh, really struggling. Really, that was rough. It was like 10 days of just really rough. I had developed like a seizure disorder. Um, and so uh, so I was in the hospital detoxing, and I went to my first treatment center up in Connecticut, and was there for about a month and a half. Um, and you know, I think when I was detoxing, I was really like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I got to get it together. And then when I got to treatment, after I had gone through like the initial detox period and the physical symptoms, um, and got introduced to like 12 step. I'm like, what, 21 years old, 20 years old, maybe a little bit less. And got introduced to like 12 step and AA. I was like, fuck this, dude. This is not for me. I'm
It
like,
was too
yeah.
regimented.
Well, I think it was too regimented. It was too like sober forever. And I
Okay,
was,
so the idea of never ever having that high again was too intimidating.
yeah, and being like, is this really me? You know? And that kind of it took that acceptance period took a long time of,
When you say, is this really me, meaning what?
am I really an alcoholic and an addict? Am I really somebody who needs to be in recovery? Do I really need to go to these meetings? Do I really need to do like all this stuff? Do I really need to raise my hand and say, hi, I'm Ben, I'm an alcoholic? Um,
What was your thought about people like that at the time?
Good question. Think I was like, good for them. That's not me though. Like they need
You
that.
don't identify with them at all.
Yeah, I'm like they need that. I don't. I just like things got a little out of hand. I can like get it together. And what happened to me, it happened so much early on in treatment, is all of my mental health stuff was coming out. So I didn't have the coping mechanism, maladaptive coping mechanism. I wasn't able to self-medicate. All of my depression and anxiety and attachment issues and wanting to be accepted and all of that just like burst out like huge, like exponentially.
What did
And
that look like?
so for me, it looked like just, again, like just the incredible discomfort in my own skin. Um, really having trouble kind of navigating the relationships and interaction socially. And it actually also looked like me getting kicked out of my first rehab because I hit somebody in the face, which was
I
not
didn't know
cool.
you could get kicked out of a rehab. I'm a little bit
I'm one of
impressed.
the special few. You gotta be
Okay, so
pretty
your
fucked up, yeah, to get kicked
so
out
your
of a rehab.
anxiety and depression and feeling the discomfort in your skin escalate to the point where you can't contain it. You punch someone in the face, you get kicked out of rehab. You don't identify with those people that need to go to AA. That's not you. You just let things get out of hand. Okay. You're continuing with that narrative, but it sounds like you're feeling like shit.
Totally.
Okay. So
I
you're
feel like
still feeling like shit. You get kicked out. What happens next?
I'm laughing because like we had talked about how I was able to like convince my parents everything is fine and like all is good is like now totally out the window. Right. They
So you're
the,
exposed.
the jig is up. Everything is not okay. Ben is not okay. Um, and I'm laughing because when I got kicked out, I'm up in Connecticut. I grew up and lived in New York City and Manhattan. And when I got kicked out, my parents were in Michigan visiting my uncle. And it's like the way the program where I was at, the way they handled it was like, he needs to leave today. And so it was like, late in the day, and my parents had to like get on a flight, fly to New York, drive up to Connecticut. They had like locked me in some room at the treatment center. Um, and they have not, addiction and substance use and alcoholism is not a part of their family story in
That's an
recovery
interesting
treatment.
segue to, right, the generational piece.
So
You're
they're
bringing
like,
something else.
yeah, so they're like, what the fuck do we do with this kid? Um, and so they took me home, and they had done enough and talked to enough people, and I asked for help enough to know that like I needed to go to meetings and I needed support, and they had gotten connected to a guy by the name of Benji Fleischer, who at the time was running a sober living in Manhattan. And I'll never forget the first phone call I had with Benji Fleischer, who's now a very good friend of mine. Um, and they wanted they wanted me to go stay there and live there. And I'll never forget the first phone call I had with him. My parents were on the phone with him. We had just gotten back home, and they were like, Benji wants to talk to you. I was like, put him on the phone with me. And he was like, hey, dude, so I heard you got kicked out of treatment for hitting somebody in the face. And I was like, yeah. He was like, well, you can come stay here, but you can't hit anybody in the face. And I was like,
Very
okay,
straightforward.
okay. And I did that. So I went to sober living and did the whole thing. I was there for 6 months and went to the meetings I was supposed to and tried to get back into school and did all that, but I didn't buy in. Right.
So you still don't identify with those people.
I still don't identify with like I have a lifelong issue and need to go to meetings. Like I had an issue, but like I can get it under control myself. And so I'm just like kind of what we would call white knuckling it, right? I'm uncomfortable, but like I'm not drinking. I know I shouldn't drink or use. Um, so I'm able to like keep myself from doing that, but I'm not buying in. I'm not being authentic when I go to meetings. I don't share. I get out as quick as possible, like all of that, which of course led to a relapse at the sober living and back to
At the sober.
treatment. Yeah,
Okay.
back to treatment. Um, this time in a place in Tennessee, which was so much better because they had this trauma component, this like heavy mental health component. It was so much better for me. And that's when I started really that started my journey of really getting into like how the adoption and the attachment issues and all that has been affecting my life. And I was there for 90 days. And that was just what I needed. And
Then
well,
since then you've been on a recovery journey.
since I've been on a recovery journey, I've been going to meetings and been able to raise my hand, say, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. And I accept who I am and, kind of what my journey in life and what I need to continue to work on. And I think like the biggest part is like having a lot of compassion for myself and being like, it makes sense, it's okay. It makes sense that you turn to that, it makes sense that you look for that escape. You are an alcoholic, it's a progressive disease, like whatever. And that's your story.
The part of a lot of times in therapy, people will talk about, I need to heal my inner child. And it's easier to address the inner child because they're innocent and things were not their fault. But if you get to that inner adolescent, that's where the cringe and the shame and the, oh my God, I don't want to know you comes up, right? And addiction and a lot of maladaptive behavior develop during those formative years of early adolescence. So when you're talking about having compassion for that part, I'm thinking about how challenging that is because that inner teenager really brings up, for me, this sense of, for years, I wanted to disown her. She was so embarrassing to me. She was so pathetic to me. I was so disgusted almost by her that I really wanted to cut off that piece and all the things she did to, to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that inner teenager that you were able to find compassion for and how you actually developed that voice.
It's funny because I so relate to what you said about like cringing and being like, uh,
Oh my God.
I did what? I said what? Um, one of the benefits of being so heavily addicted to substances is not having a good memory of all of that, you know?
Mm.
So
So
there,
there
there
is a
definitely
silver
things,
lining.
yeah, it's like secondhand embarrassment where it's like, I don't actually remember doing it. I remember being told I did it, right? Um, yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey to get to that point, right? Of the self-compassion. And I think for that inner adolescent, and I think, one of the things that has been most important in coming to that point, and it's a daily thing, right? Um, is is doing a lot of work on myself to realize who I am authentically, right? And falling in love with that person and 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 that, if you're able to get to that point and continue to do practices to stay there, then forgiving your inner adolescent is somehow easier. Um, and so I don't look at that inner adolescent anymore as like this. I mean, most of the time, as this like cringy, disgusting human being, but more of a like, uh, a teenager who was like in pain, right? Who was in pain, struggling, and um, trying desperately to figure it out. So I have so much more compassion for that period of my life.
Do you have gratitude for that part of yourself?
Yeah, yeah. Which part of myself?
The
The
teenager that did whatever, he could to feel okay. The part that found the substances in order to survive.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's the juice. Like, I have gratitude for all of the things I've done and gone through. All of it has been painful. I've burned a lot of bridges. I've, you know, um, done things I've regretted. I've, hurt people. I've hurt myself. Like all of those things. But like today, I have gratitude for the whole journey because I am where I am only because all of that happened exactly the way it happened. And I wouldn't be here unless that equation turned out exactly the way it did. And I love where I am. You know, I love what I'm doing professionally. I love my amazing wife and partner. I love my daughter. I love my friends like you. I regret nothing. So, um, but that was a process too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a
It's going to
process.
continue, I believe, to be a process, right? Of re-owning and claiming the parts of ourselves that we've locked in a basement and said, ew, gross, go away. I don't know you.
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying it's a daily kind of reprieve. It's a
Absolutely.
daily. I I wake up the worst version of myself.
Okay.
The first thing in the morning,
Do you start at a negative the day?
I start definitely. I'm tired, I'm cranky, I'm anxious, I'm resentful. Like I just I kind of like
Yeah.
just sit there, and then I have to do things daily to bring me to the place I want to be. I have to have my coffee, obviously, but I have to like meditate and connect with my authentic self. I have to practice gratitude. Um, I have to interact throughout the day with people I love who are there for me. um, Quality time with my family. Like I need to do the daily thing. I need to go to AA meetings every week, you know.
Do you find meaning now in those meetings that you so rejected initially?
Yeah. And community and support and for me brotherhood, you know, other men, other dads who are, kind of working through it and we're doing it together and we can be vulnerable and authentic and like none of that like toxic masculinity, of like, oh, like being real and having people I can rely on and be authentic with all the time and tell my deepest, darkest stuff to. It's my superpower.
Have you forgiven yourself?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Today, you know,
Just for today.
just for today,
Just for today.
just for today. I don't think it's healthy um, for me to get into this like I have forgiven myself kind of definitive. I am recovered definitive. I am healed. Any of those like kind of definitive definitions, which I think is redundant, um, is a dangerous place for me to be in.
I think for a lot of people, I identify with that too. It feels too overwhelming and locked into one label.
Yes, and for me it keeps me from doing the things I have to do daily. Right? If I'm
So you take,
recovered,
right, you're healed.
yeah, if I'm healed, I don't have to do shit every day. I'm good. I got it. dangerous. I'm only where I am because of the things that I do to work on myself every day.
And you're passing it forward now in multiple ways. It's in the way that you parent, right? And it's in your work with people that have been in your shoes, the adolescents that hide, the parents that are desperate for a resolution for their kid. You're dealing with a lot of the helplessness that you yourself faced.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it. I love it because I can resonate, you know. I can empathize really authentically. Um, I love it because um, I love to connect and to feel like I'm really helping and um, I love it because I am passing it forward. You know, there's so many, I said I so many times during that story and in this conversation when it's taken so many people for me to get to where I am. So many people just helping, just saying yes, just showing up, right? Um, just like kind of doing the next right thing and doing things that very unselfishly, actually doing a lot of things that probably put a burden on them, but doing it because it's the right thing to do and they want to help. So my story is attributed to many people. Um, and it feels really good to be one of those people, hopefully, for somebody else.
And it's passing on the generational resilience, right? It's not just the biology piece here. It's you're also affecting the people that you work with and your family. You're creating new generational patterns, new traditions, and stories that are not just you come from tragedy initially, both biologically and, your parents being Jewish people come with the burdens of that genetic baggage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it's so important just for the world. You know, from a macro lens, I think it's so important for the world for I'm so glad you're doing this podcast and having these conversations. I think the only way the world can progress in a way that is um, healthy and healing and supportive of people is for us to be aware of the generational patterns and put in a lot of the work because it is a lot of work and effort to change it,
Absolutely.
you know? Um, and I think every generation is responsible for that.
It was just Passover, and there's this sentence there of B'chol dor v'dor, which is every generation and generation. That's the direct translation, is responsible for remembering how they escaped Egypt, right? So this really feels topical to what you're talking about. We need to remember the wreckage to build something new.
Yeah, right.
Ben,
And
I'm so grateful you showed up. We do have to wrap up, but
okay.
finish the last thought.
No, I was just gonna say, and so we need to look backwards and look forwards, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for reaching out and asking me to do this. It's a lot of fun.
I really appreciate it. And where can we find you?
So I have just began a group practice. It's called Searchlight Therapy. You can find me. The website is searchlighttherapy.com, so you can find us there, and you can also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you. Keep doing exactly what you're doing, and I love you.
All right, love you. Thanks so much.
And that was my conversation with Ben Mushlin. I personally tend to trust people who have lived through what they preach/help people with. It makes it feel real, less theoretical, and I definitely have that sense from Ben. He walks the walk, and I respect that. And if you want to learn more about Ben, all of his info will be in the show notes. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or send me an email. This has been How Did You Get Here? I'm Maya Kruger. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.